My mom rewrote her will to exclude me after I paid off her debts. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and this story involves my mom 57 female, my dad 55 male, and my older sister Claire 32 female. We're a middle-class family, nothing extraordinary. My mom runs a small business, and my dad has been a homemaker for as long as I can remember. Claire though has always been the golden child. Growing up, she was the one with the straight A's, the talent for everything she touched, and the charm to win over anyone. I wasn't a screw-up or anything, but compared to Claire, I was always just there. She was the star and I was the steady one in the background. 2 years ago, my mom's business took a nosedive. Mismanagement and bad financial decisions had put her in serious debt. She was on the verge of bankruptcy and things were dire. Suppliers were threatening lawsuits, her employees were quitting, and the bills were piling up. She was desperate, and that's when she turned to me for help. At the time, I just bought my first home and was starting to build up some savings. I'd worked hard for years to get to that point, budgeting carefully, cutting corners, and sacrificing luxuries so I could finally feel financially stable. But when my mom called me one night, voice shaking, and laid out the situation, I couldn't say no. She needed $40,000 to cover the most critical debts and keep the business afloat. It wasn't an easy decision. I knew it would set me back years financially, but my mom was in full-on panic mode. She promised me she'd pay it all back within 2 years. She even mentioned that if something went wrong, she'd secure my share of the inheritance in her will to make sure I wasn't left out in the cold. I trusted her. She was my mom after all. My sister, Claire, was notably absent during this whole ordeal. She had her own life to worry about, as she put it. She didn't have the money to help, or at least that's what she claimed. She did offer moral support to my mom, calling her often and encouraging her to stay strong, but financially, she didn't lift a finger. My dad, of course, didn't push her. Instead, he and the extended family zeroed in on me. They guilted me with talks of how much my mom had sacrificed to raise us, how she'd worked so hard to give us a good life. They made me feel like I owed it to her, so I handed over the $40,000 hoping it would be enough to pull her out of the hole she dug herself into. To her credit, the money helped. My mom's business started to recover slowly. She downsized operations, focused on paying off debts, and eventually began turning a modest profit again. At first, she was incredibly grateful. She called me the rock of the family, the one who'd saved everything. It felt good to hear that even if the financial hit was hard to swallow. I thought I'd done the right thing. But over the past year something shifted. Every time I brought up repayment my mom became defensive and distant. "It's coming," she'd say, or "I need a little more time." The gratitude she'd shown initially seemed to evaporate. Meanwhile, Claire was suddenly involved in the business. She started attending meetings, giving her advice, and acting like she was part of the turnaround effort. My mom began praising her constantly, calling her her rock and talking about how much she'd done to support her. It stung, but I brushed it off. I figured it was just mom being mom. Then, about 6 months ago, I overheard a conversation between my parents. I was at their house and they didn't realize I was within earshot. They were talking about updating the will. My dad mentioned leaving the bulk of everything to Claire because she's the one who's been there for me. My mom hesitated, bringing up my contribution, but my dad dismissed it saying he's financially stable. She doesn't need it. That was a punch to the gut. I confronted my mom later and she admitted it. She'd rewritten the will leaving Claire the majority of the inheritance and cutting me out entirely. Her justification: Claire had been instrumental in helping the business recover while I didn't need the money. I reminded her about the $40,000, the promise of repayment, and the inheritance safeguard she'd mentioned, but she shrugged it off saying, "You'll be fine." At that moment, I realized just how much I'd been taken advantage of. I'd sacrificed my savings, delayed my own plans, and bailed her out of a crisis, only to be sidelined and dismissed. It wasn't just about the money, it was the betrayal, the blatant favoritism, and the fact that my sacrifice had been so easily forgotten. This is where it all began. Little did I know, things were about to get a lot messier. Update 1. After finding out about the will changes and my mom's justification, I went home and told my partner, Anna, everything. Anna's been my rock through a lot, and I knew I could count on her for perspective. When I laid it all out, the loan, the promise of repayment, and now the blatant favoritism, she was stunned. She asked me if I had any written proof of the loan. I didn't, just a few vague texts from when we first discussed it. Anna suggested I consult a lawyer, not to fight over the will, but to at least recover my $40,000. Before taking any legal steps, I decided to call for a family meeting. I wanted everything out in the open and thought maybe, just maybe, my mom would see reason. We gathered at my parents' house the following weekend. It was me, Anna, my parents and Claire. As soon as I brought up the will, Claire rolled her eyes. My mom didn't even try to deny it. She repeated the same reasoning. Claire had been more involved in the business, and I was financially stable so I didn't need the inheritance. When I brought up the $40,000, Claire jumped in before my mom could respond. She called it a loan and accused me of being greedy. According to her, I should have given the money without expecting anything in return because family helps family. My mom just nodded along. When I asked why she promised to repay me and then changed her mind, she dismissed it, saying I'd misinterpreted her intentions. My dad stayed quiet through the entire discussion, only muttering that he didn't want the family to fight. The meeting ended with Claire storming off and my mom telling me to get over it. Frustrated, I decided to share what happened with some of my relatives. I thought they'd back me up, but the reactions were mixed. A few, like my cousin Daniel, were sympathetic and called out my mom's behavior. Others took Claire's side, saying I was overreacting and should let it go for the sake of family unity. It was clear Claire had been spinning her version of events, painting me as the villain trying to ruin my mom's retirement. Anna and I agreed it was time to get professional advice. I booked a consultation with a lawyer who explained that contesting a will is incredibly difficult. However, recovering the $40,000 might be possible if I had evidence. That night, I started combing through old emails and bank records. I found a few texts where my mom had thanked me for the loan and promised to pay it back soon. While they weren't definitive, the lawyer thought they might be enough to build a case. As word spread about my consultation, my dad started calling me daily, begging me not to escalate things. He reminded me how hard my mom's life had been recently, with the business struggles and her health issues. He said taking legal action would destroy the family and that I'd regret it. I asked him why he wasn't pushing my mom to do the right thing, but he dodged the question, saying he just wanted peace. Meanwhile, Claire took things to another level. Through a mutual relative, I found out she'd been telling everyone I was trying to bankrupt my mom out of spite. She claimed I was jealous of her success and wanted to sabotage the family business. It was infuriating, but I tried to stay focused. I gave my mom one last chance to settle this privately. I called her and laid it out. Either we talk and come to an agreement, or I'd have no choice but to take legal action. She brushed me off, saying, "Money isn't everything." The emotional toll started weighing on me. Every time I thought about how easily they dismissed everything I'd done, it felt like a punch to the gut. Thankfully, Anna and a few close friends were there to remind me I wasn't crazy for standing my ground. They encouraged me to push forward even when I started doubting myself. Feeling cornered and unsure of my next move, I decided to share my story online. I wasn't expecting much, but I wanted advice from people who'd been in similar situations. I posted on Reddit detailing the whole saga, from the $40,000 loan to the will changes and my mom's complete disregard for her promises. The response was overwhelming. The post blew up, and thousands of people chimed in with support and advice. Many shared their own stories of betrayal, and some even gave me tips on how to strengthen my legal case. Others suggested I go no contact with my family entirely, though I wasn't sure I was ready for that. The most surprising thing was how validating it felt to read strangers' comments. For the first time, I didn't feel crazy for being upset. People confirmed what I'd been feeling all along. My family had taken advantage of me and I deserved to stand up for myself. It gave me the push I needed to keep going. This was just the beginning. The fallout from my decision to take a stand was about to get even messier. Update 2, the response to my Reddit post was overwhelming. The general consensus: forget the will, focus on getting the $40,000 back. Fighting over inheritance could drag on forever, but recovering the loan was a concrete goal. Armed with this advice, I decided to try one last time to resolve things with my mom. I showed up at my parents' house unannounced. My dad let me in, but the tension was palpable. When I sat down with my mom, I explained that this wasn't just about the money, it was about the promise she'd made and the principle of it all. She cut me off, calling me ungrateful and disrespectful for throwing her generosity back in her face. I reminded her that I'd bailed her out when she was drowning in debt, but she doubled down, accusing me of trying to tear the family apart over a little bit of money. It was clear we weren't getting anywhere. A few hours after I left, my dad called. He didn't yell or argue, but went straight to guilt-tripping. He talked about how hard things had been for my mom, how much she'd sacrificed for us, and how this whole situation was breaking his heart. He begged me to let it go, insisting that family was more important than money. I asked him why he wasn't pushing mom to honor her promise. He sidestepped the question, saying he didn't want to take sides. Then Claire chimed in literally. She sent me a text that evening dripping with condescension. "I guess mom knows who the real MVP is. Maybe if you spent less time whining you'd get some recognition too." I didn't respond, but her message only reinforced my decision. The next day I contacted my lawyer to start the process. My lawyer drafted a formal demand letter outlining the $40,000 loan and requesting repayment. It was sent to my mom by certified mail. I knew this would escalate things, but at this point I didn't see another option. As expected, word spread quickly through the family. I started getting calls and messages from relatives accusing me of being selfish and vindictive. Some said I was tearing the family apart, others implied I was trying to ruin my mom's retirement. A few defended me, but it was clear the majority had taken mom and Claire's side. Amid all this chaos, I learned through a mutual acquaintance that my mom's business was struggling again. Her financial mismanagement hadn't stopped and she was making risky decisions that weren't paying off. I wasn't surprised, but it was frustrating to see how little had changed after everything I'd done to help. To strengthen my case, I decided to share some of the emails and texts I'd found with a few trusted family members. I wasn't trying to sway anyone, but I wanted to make it clear I wasn't fabricating anything. The evidence started to shift a few opinions. A couple of relatives who'd initially sided with Mom admitted they hadn't realized how much I'd done for her. I updated Reddit with everything that had happened so far, and the support came pouring in again. People offered advice on how to navigate the legal process, shared similar stories of family betrayal, and reminded me that standing up for myself wasn't wrong. Some even dug into public records and found concerning details about Claire's involvement in the business, which matched something a cousin had recently told me. Apparently, Claire had been siphoning money from the business for her personal use. She'd framed it as consulting fees, but was essentially draining resources under the radar. The cousin, who had access to some of the financial records, shared screenshots with me. It was shocking, but not entirely surprising. This new information added another layer to the mess. Family gatherings became impossible. People had taken sides and the divide was clear. My mom and Claire had their loyalists, while a smaller group, including a few cousins, supported me. I stopped attending events entirely to avoid the drama, which only fueled more gossip. Every decision I made seemed to add to the narrative Claire and my mom were spinning about me being the bad guy. The legal process wasn't cheap and the mounting fees started to take a toll. Anna and I cut back on expenses to make it work, but the stress was real. Still, I couldn't back down. The alternative, letting my mom and Claire walk all over me, was worse. My mom, meanwhile, tried to counter by painting me as a liar. She told anyone who would listen that the $40,000 was a gift, not a loan. But my evidence was solid enough to start swaying some of the neutral family members. A few even reached out to apologize for doubting me. Then an unexpected ally emerged. One of my mom's former business partners contacted me. He'd heard about the legal dispute and offered insider information about how my mom had been running things. She didn't have anything directly related to the $40,000, but her insights into the business and Claire's role in its downfall could be valuable if things escalated further. As the dust settled for the moment, I realized the fight was far from over. Every step forward seemed to uncover more layers of betrayal, but at least now I wasn't fighting alone. The support I'd gained, both online and offline, was keeping me grounded as I prepared for whatever came next. Update 3, not long after the former business partner reached out, he sent me more details about Claire's involvement in the company's finances. According to him, Claire had been funneling money into her personal account under the label of consulting fees. These weren't small amounts either. She'd siphoned off $1,000 over several months. The partner had seen it himself in the financial records and decided to share screenshots with me as proof. With this new information in hand, I confronted my mom again. I laid out what I'd learned and showed her the evidence. Instead of addressing the issue, she accused me of trying to divide the family and sabotage the business. She claimed the records were being misinterpreted and dismissed everything as a misunderstanding. It was clear she wasn't going to listen, no matter how solid the proof. Meanwhile, my lawyer moved forward with filing a formal claim for the $40,000. The demand letter had gone unanswered, so this was the next step. My mom was served the paperwork and the reality of the legal action seemed to hit her hard. Within days, my dad showed up at my house unannounced and in tears. He begged me to drop the lawsuit, claiming it was tearing the family apart and ruining my mom's health. I asked him again why he wasn't holding Claire accountable for her actions. He avoided the question and kept pleading with me to let it go. I decided it was time to confront Claire directly. I messaged her, outlining everything I knew about her embezzlement and warning her that if she didn't back off, I'd make it public. Her response was exactly what I expected: arrogance and denial. She claimed she deserved the money because she was saving the family business and accused me of being bitter because I wasn't involved. It was infuriating, but I wasn't backing down. The cousin who'd originally flagged Claire's financial misconduct took things a step further. They shared even more screenshots of the business's financial records, which painted an even clearer picture of Claire's actions. Armed with this new evidence, I decided to share it with a few family members who'd been on the fence. Their reactions were immediate. Some were horrified and began questioning everything they'd heard from my mom and Claire. Her word got back to my mom and she called for a family meeting. She framed it as a way to settle things, but it was obvious the real goal was damage control. The meeting was held at my parents' house with several family members present. The atmosphere was tense from the start and my mom made it clear she was backing Claire. She started off by blaming me for bringing unnecessary drama into the family. When it was my turn to speak, I presented the evidence of Claire's embezzlement. I walked everyone through the screenshots and financial records, making it impossible to ignore what she'd done. The room erupted. Claire tried to defend herself, claiming she'd only taken what she was owed for her hard work. My mom jumped in, insisting Claire had done nothing wrong and accusing me of trying to destroy her legacy. The confrontation hit a boiling point when Claire stormed out of the room, yelling that I was ruining her life. My mom followed her, leaving the rest of us in stunned silence. A few family members who'd been on their side began to reconsider, especially after seeing the evidence for themselves. The divide in the family was now undeniable. In the weeks that followed, the fallout spread. My mom started stepping back from the business, leaving Claire to manage things alone. Rumors began circulating that the business was on the verge of collapse due to her poor decisions. Clients were pulling out and suppliers were refusing to extend credit. The very thing my mom had fought so hard to save was slipping through their fingers. Through all of this, I couldn't ignore the toll the fight was taking on me. The constant arguments, the legal process, and the fractured family dynamics were exhausting. Still, I felt vindicated knowing the truth was finally coming to light. The evidence against Claire was too strong to ignore, and more people were starting to see things for what they really were. By now, I'd come to terms with the fact that this might permanently sever my ties with my mom and Claire. It was a painful realization, but I knew I couldn't let their actions go unchecked. The business partner who'd helped me hinted that there might be even more dirt to uncover, but I wasn't sure how much deeper I wanted to dig. As the dust settled, I reflected on everything that had happened. My mom's refusal to hold Claire accountable, even in the face of undeniable proof, spoke volumes. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about the blatant favoritism and betrayal. This was the breaking point, and there was no going back. Update 4. With tensions at an all-time high, my lawyer suggested we try mediation to resolve the $40,000 loan dispute. It was a faster and less expensive option than going through a full court case, and it might push my mom to finally take responsibility. Reluctantly, she agreed to participate. Around the same time, Claire's house of cards started to collapse. The business officially filed for bankruptcy. Clients had pulled out due to the growing rumors of mismanagement, and suppliers stopped extending credit. Claire was at the center of the scrutiny, with my mom's former partners and extended family openly questioning her actions. Her reputation was in tatters, and even my mom couldn't shield her from the fallout. Before the mediation, my dad called me. He pleaded with me to forgive Claire and make amends for the sake of the family. He insisted that Claire was struggling and that the bankruptcy was punishment enough. I reminded him how much I had already sacrificed for the family and pointed out that Claire's struggles were entirely self-inflicted. My dad, as usual, avoided acknowledging that Claire had done anything wrong. When the mediation day arrived, the tension in the room was thick. My mom sat across from me, visibly irritated. She tried to downplay the loan, claiming it was given in the spirit of family and shouldn't have to be repaid. My lawyer countered with the evidence, texts, emails, and even a bank transfer note labeling it as a loan. Cornered, my mom had no choice but to agree to a repayment plan. It was structured so that she couldn't default without facing legal consequences. It wasn't ideal, but it was a step forward. After the session, my mom made one last attempt to guilt-trip me, accusing me of prioritizing money over family. I calmly reminded her of the sacrifices I'd made and how she betrayed my trust. She had no response, just a bitter glare as she left the room. Meanwhile, Claire's personal fallout escalated. With the business gone and her reputation in ruins, she lost her apartment and had to move back in with my parents. She loudly blamed me for ruining everything, ignoring the fact that her actions had led to the bankruptcy. The sibling relationship, which had been rocky at best, was now completely severed. She cut all contact with me, cementing the divide. The extended family remained divided as well. Some stood by my mom and Claire, convinced I'd overreacted. Others, however, began to understand the full picture as more details of Claire's misconduct came to light. A few even apologized for doubting me, saying they hadn't realized how much I'd been taken advantage of. It was bittersweet, but at least the truth was coming out. Despite everything, my mom refused to admit fault. She continued to claim I'd attacked the family by taking legal action, refusing to acknowledge the betrayal or Claire's role in the collapse of her business. Her pride wouldn't allow her to see reason, and I realized there was no point in trying to change her mind. To process the emotional toll of it all, I started therapy. It helped me understand how deep the dysfunction in my family ran and taught me how to detach from their drama. I stopped seeking my mom's approval and began focusing on building a life independent of their influence. Anna and my close friends were my anchors through this period. Their support reminded me that I wasn't alone, even as my relationship with my immediate family disintegrated. Anna, in particular, was incredible. She kept me grounded and encouraged me to prioritize my well-being. The repayment plan kicked in shortly after mediation and I started receiving installments. It didn't undo the damage, but it eased the financial strain and gave me a sense of closure. Knowing that I'd held my ground and gotten back what was rightfully mine was empowering. As for my mom, her former business partners completely cut ties with her. They wanted nothing to do with the mess Claire had created. And without their support, my mom was left isolated. She clung to her version of events, but her once strong reputation in the community was now in tatters. I made the decision to move forward. Therapy helped me let go of the resentment and accept that I couldn't control my mom's actions or choices. I stopped attending family gatherings, set firm boundaries with relatives, and focused on the people who genuinely cared about me. Looking back, the entire ordeal was a harsh but necessary wake-up call. It taught me the importance of standing up for myself even when it's uncomfortable or painful. My mom and Claire made their choices and I made mine. While I'll never forget the betrayal, I'm determined not to let it define me. I've started focusing on my career and future with Anna. The repayments from the loan are helping us plan for the next chapter of our lives, and we're moving forward without the weight of my family's dysfunction holding us back. For the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm in control of my own story. Update 5. The final repayment arrived last month. With that, the financial part of this ordeal was officially over. It had been a long and draining process, but every installment reminded me why I had fought so hard to stand up for myself. While the $40,000 repayment didn't erase the damage done, it marked the end of that chapter and gave me the financial freedom to focus on my future. After receiving the last payment, I made the decision to go no contact with both my mom and Claire. The repeated betrayals, favoritism, and lack of accountability left no room for reconciliation. Cutting them out wasn't easy, but it was necessary for my peace of mind. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without their drama hanging over me. Anna and I have grown even closer through all of this. She's been my biggest supporter and now we're planning our future together. Without the constant stress of my family's dysfunction, we've been able to focus on building something stable and meaningful. We've started looking at new homes, something we'd put on hold during the repayment process. It's exciting to finally be moving forward without financial or emotional baggage weighing us down. At work, things have been going well too. With the repayment helping to ease my financial strain, I've been able to invest more energy into my career. I recently got a promotion, and for the first time, I feel like I'm truly thriving in my professional life. The contrast between my family's chaos and the stability I found elsewhere has been eye-opening. Therapy has also been a game changer. It's helped me redefine what family means to me. I've come to realize that family isn't about blood, it's about the people who genuinely care about you and show up when it matters. For me, that's Anna, a few close friends, and surprisingly my cousin. The same cousin who leaked Claire's financial misconduct has become a confidant. They've been supportive throughout this entire process and we've grown much closer as a result. Speaking of Claire, I've heard through mutual acquaintances that she's still struggling. After the business collapsed, she hasn't been able to hold down a stable job and is facing significant financial difficulties. True to form, she's blaming everyone but herself for her situation. I haven't reached out and have no plans to, but hearing about her downward spiral has been a reminder of how toxic her behavior was. As for my mom, her refusal to take accountability has left her increasingly isolated. Most of the extended family has distanced themselves, especially after the truth about Claire's misconduct came to light. The few relatives who still speak to her have told me she spends most of her time reminiscing about the past, trying to rewrite history to make herself the victim. It's sad, but I've accepted that she's unlikely to change. My dad has quietly reached out a few times. He hasn't outright apologized, but he's made comments that suggest he regrets not standing up for me. Still, he remains tied to my mom and her decisions, so I've kept my boundaries firm. I've learned not to expect more from him than he's capable of giving, and that realization has made it easier to let go of lingering resentment. The support I've received online has been incredible. My Reddit updates sparked conversations with people who've been through similar situations, and the solidarity has been both humbling and empowering. Sharing my story has helped others feel less alone in their struggles, and it's been a reminder that even in the darkest times there are people out there who understand and care. I've also set clear boundaries with the remaining family members in my life. While I'm open to healthy relationships, I won't tolerate manipulation or guilt tripping. That's been a hard line to draw, but it's one I'm committed to maintaining. The mistakes of the past won't be repeated. With the repayment complete, Anna and I are finally able to make some long-term plans. We're exploring neighborhoods for our dream home, and I've even started putting money aside for an investment portfolio. For so long, I felt stuck, but now the possibilities feel endless. It's a good feeling to finally have control over my own life. Reflecting on everything, I've come to realize that my financial sacrifice was a double-edged sword. It exposed the true dynamics of my family and forced me to confront painful truths. While it was a hard lesson to learn, I'm grateful for the clarity it brought. I've let go of the need for my mom's approval, and I am instead focused on building a life that aligns with my values and goals. To everyone who followed my story and offered support, I can't thank you enough. Your advice, encouragement, and shared experiences have meant the world to me. This journey hasn't been easy, but knowing I wasn't alone made it bearable. For anyone facing similar challenges, I hope my story serves as a reminder that standing up for yourself is always worth it. This is my final update. I'm closing this chapter and moving forward with hope and determination. Life is far from perfect, but it's mine, and I'm excited to see where it takes me next. Thank you all for being a part of this journey.